Good evening and welcome to Writers Unplugged. This is a series with a chance to hear your favorite writers or perhaps new to you writers in conversation as if you were eavesdropping on us in a coffee shop. My name is Jen Jumba. I'm a librarian at the main branch of the Cleveland Public Library, and one of my favorite things besides reading is talking to writers. It's an opportunity to get to know their craft, what inspires their stories, where they like to write, essentially getting to know them better and seeing them as human beings and not just the name on the spine of a book. And this evening, we are so lucky to have Mustafa Marwan joining us from the future because he's in Australia. They're 15 hours ahead. And he's going to talk about his debut novel, Guns and Almond Milk. Before we get started, a few housekeeping notes to find out who else is visiting Writers Unplugged, both virtually and in person. Visit cpl.org/upcoming. And then Maxbacks Books on Coventry, which is our wonderful independent bookstore, has copies of Mustafa's books for you. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. I'll be sure to ask him. But first, a brief introduction. Mustafa Marwan is an Egyptian writer, aid worker, and trainer. He studied pharmacy, public health, nanotechnology, and management. Mustafa has spent over a decade of humanitarian work in more than a dozen conflict zones around the world, including most Arab Spring countries at the heights and the lows of their uprisings. He has a strong penchant for noir, dark humor, and books that strike the magical balance between the literary and the commercial. Mustafa Marwan is a well-respected worker in his field. He has been consulted and lectured on topics such as management and leadership and health and social care, as well as facilitated intercultural dialogue programs in several countries. This Writers Unplugged series has been a wonderful experience and allowed me the opportunity to meet many talented writers and bring them to you. Asma Khan, who was a guest last year, when we talked about Blood Betrayal, the second book in the Inaya Rahan series, she sent me an email, introduced me to Mustafa, and I was immediately impressed with his debut novel, Guns and Almond Milk, and I wanted to introduce him to all of you. So please join me in a warm welcome to Mustafa Marwan. Thank you so
Jen,
much for joining
thank you
us.
for the introduction.
Oh, you
Sure.
are quite welcome. So Guns and Almond Milk. I should also mention it has been nominated as a finalist for the Page Turner Award, which I think is appropriately named as a reader. You know, it's either that or the Just One More Chapter Award. But can you explain? We were talking a little bit beforehand about Page Turner Awards.
Yeah, so awards are just the cherry on the cake, I guess. So I applied on my own for this award, and I was happy to be shortlisted and a finalist. It gives you a little bit of recognition, especially when it's your first book. You don't know how people will receive it. So that was very early on in the process. So I'm happy for that. But also, if it didn't come, what really matters is whether readers would like it or not.
Well, I can't speak for all readers. However, I can say that I absolutely enjoyed reading Guns and Almond Milk. So can you give people who haven't had a chance to read it yet just an overview of what the story is about?
So the story is about Luke Archer. He's a British Muslim doctor who struggles with addiction and belonging. He's forced by circumstances to leave the UK and move to the most dangerous hospital on earth in Yemen, where he's taken hostage. And now, after years trying to save the lives of others, he has to face the demons of his past to save his team and himself.
Luke Archer, I have to say, is a wonderfully drawn character, right? I think we can all find that relatable part of, you know, wanting to find ourselves and kind of confronting the demons and sitting with stuff. Most often, though, we are not doing that in Yemen, this incredibly violent, turbulent area. Can you talk a little bit about why you chose to set the book in Yemen?
Because it's a forgotten area, and I've been to Yemen twice, and I've seen the devastation there. And I've seen how in some parts of Yemen, even if it's not touched by war, it's touched by severe poverty. People in certain places are living in huts where there is no fire or water or anything, just the usual the things that we have been experiencing as a species 100 years ago, which is truly unfair. And there is what we call in the aid business donor fatigue when it comes to countries like Yemen. So there isn't much aid for them. So it's a place that is close to my heart, especially that the people are amazing in the hospitality. Even if they don't have anything, they would prioritize you over themselves. It's just the culture is fascinating there.
Absolutely. So I'm joined by incredibly great writer, Mustafa Marwan, who wrote Guns and Almond Milk. I'm even struck by the title, right? The ands, right? You have two things that are seemingly completely opposite. You have guns, and if you all can see, so those of you who are listening, it looks like an IV pole with a bag of blood, but then the pole kind of morphs into what looks like a rocket and also a machine gun. I know you have names for them in the book that they're affectionately referred to as a clash and a couple other things. But just the juxtaposition between these two things, almond milk, which now everybody wants instead of regular milk in their coffee at Starbucks, right? And then you have guns. So where did the title come from?
The title came from Aristotle, actually,
Okay.
funny enough. And you rightfully captured the idea of extremes. So I wanted to capture this idea. Aristotle once talked about how if you want to know vice from virtue, you have to know that virtue is never an extreme. It's always in the middle between two vices, sandwiched between two vices. So you have generosity, it's in the middle between recklessness and being stingent or being, and you have courageousness, for example, and it's in the middle between recklessness and cowardice. So you always find it in the middle. And I was trying to show that there are situations where you only work with extremes, and
Yes.
our world is turning into extremes. Even
Yes.
in America now, I mean, I don't
Yes.
want to talk about a country I don't know much about, but everyone is interested about the two extremes that are happening
Yes.
now in America and how the dialogue is changing from talking about
Right.
serious issues to talking about personal things. And the clashes and the gap is being divided. So I thought of making it about extremes. There is nothing wrong with people who have guns to protect their families or their homes. Same thing, there is nothing wrong about people who use almond milk in their coffee.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, I don't do it, but I respect anyone who wants it. But it's just the
Right.
idea of extremes that I found. Also, interestingly, I had a situation where we were in a country, and so we were in Afghanistan. And after 2 hours of a security briefing, the first question that a very close friend of mine asked was where to find almond milk in Kabul. So for me, that was a funny thing, and I included it in the novel. But again, this person is a very close friend of mine, and I don't mind it. It's just the
Yeah.
timing was a little bit funny. That's why I included it in the novel.
Absolutely. I'm imagining that a lot of your work that you've done in these countries in conflict, across the world, informed the work. Because when I'm reading Guns and Almond Milk, I can smell the smells that you vividly describe in the book. I can sense the setting where I am. I feel like I was immediately set in this hospital setting, even in the car ride in. So can you talk a little bit about how your experience informed what you wrote?
Well, interestingly, there are many true events either happened to me or I witnessed in this novel. So, for example, the opening scene where they are stopped at a checkpoint, and then 100 meters after they leave it, the checkpoint is an explosion takes place, a suicide bomber, and this happened in reality, but it wasn't in Yemen. It was in Libya, and the discussion that delayed the team at the checkpoint wasn't about Metallica as in the novel, but it was about a famous Arabic actor, Egyptian actor, which now I don't like because he almost got us killed.
Oh,
So
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
So there are many events that shaped how this book is being given. For example, there is an example where someone has lost his leg, but he's very happy to receive the bullets that shredded this leg
Yeah, they
because they keep
collect
it as
them.
souvenirs. Yeah, they
Absolutely.
collect them.
You know,
So this happened in reality.
wow.
Yeah. So
And
so
yet you keep going back. I mean, these are things that are, I mean, if I mess up as a librarian, there's not much that happens if I recommend the wrong book to you to read or connect you to the wrong database. But you deal with life and death like on a daily basis, and that has to be challenging.
it takes a mental and emotional toll, but at the same time, you would never know the reason why a person is going there. So there is a line in the novel which says uh,
Mhm.
humanitarians are two types. One is running away from something, and one is running towards something.
Yes.
So that's something I wanted to make sure that takes place, that in the novel, there are
Hmm.
no black and white, even aid workers. They're always
Yeah.
gray characters,
Yeah.
and there are no heroes and villains. I remember a discussion with my in-laws about who were the heroes and villains, and one of them said, "You are portraying it like it's the mercenaries," and another said, "You're portraying it like it's the rebels." And what I said is that it's neither. Everyone
No,
is great character.
that's exactly right. And I think one of the things, it's funny because I had that to ask you about your definition, you know, the two types of humanitarians, running towards and running from. So I would definitely say you're somebody who runs toward, as a way to help and aid the people that need your help and need your assistance. Um, so I'm joined in conversation this evening with Mustafa Marwan, Guns and Almond Milk, incredible book. The other thing that I think about of humanitarians is when they go to the countries to do the work, how many things they have to know besides the language, you know, the customs and the traditions. There's a scene in the book where there's a physician in the hospital who's relatively young, but in that particular culture in Yemen, they look at young as not wise, like somebody who's older. So trying to balance all of that to make sure that you fit and you kind of embed so that you can do well. I mean, I imagine it's a lot of things to learn.
It's not easy, and there is a big discussion in the humanitarian field now about localization and how national NGOs knows the culture more than anyone else, and they should be given a bigger piece of the pie of funding, but also of capacity building, although sometimes they are more
Yeah.
situated than international staff. So I'm of the opinion that I want to be redundant
Okay.
as an expat aid worker. I want to be redundant. I want to reach this stage where the national staff and the national NGOs are able to do this because they are capable of doing it more than anyone else. At least that's my opinion. But
No,
there is a big
it makes
divide in
perfect
the aid work.
sense. Wow, I'm surprised because one would think in order to be successful, like you would take the best practices. But
Well, I mean, some of that, because the national organizations are the first one on the scene.
yeah,
They know the culture, they know everything. So we actually take best practices from them regarding the culture, or from national staff who accompany us. Without national staff, we would be able to do very, very little. So
yeah,
that's kudos to them, wherever they are,
good.
fighting on their own with very little resources.
Yeah, that is an impressive feat. You know, all the things that juggling, you know, life first and foremost, and then making sure that you are adding to and not taking away from the people that are suffering from that conflict. I'm struck by the beginning of the book, Dr. Luke Archer, right? Such an interesting character. And he talks about triage as being one of his favorite things. He says that as humans, we're very good at complicating things. And with triage, it's very simple. It's the ABCs, right? Like airway, breathing, and circulation. And I just found that interesting, that everything else was going on and he preferred the simplicity. So,
Yeah, it's it's again, it comes again to the idea of uh, complexity.
yeah,
The being in a conflict zone, it's a very complex thing, and you
yeah,
don't need to increase this complexity with further things. So Luke, he's struggling with diversity
Mm-hmm.
and belonging rather,
Yes.
and he wants to be on his own, trying to do a difference
Mm-hmm.
until his arc develops a little bit as we go
Yeah.
on. But at that time, he's struggling with addiction. He's having
Mm-hmm.
problems connecting to others. There are scenes where the best creature he connected to was the cat,
Yeah.
uh, not his colleagues. So
Uh-huh.
it made sense that he uh, finds himself in triage. I've been to triages before, and I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
say it's that easy. It's
Mm-mm.
it's it's very stressful task, and if you are not careful, they will stay with you your whole life because you're deciding basically who's taking the care and who's being delayed, and you have to
Mm-hmm.
do your decisions on the fly. So uh, in real life, I wouldn't agree with Luke, but I'm not Luke, so
Yeah.
that was his stance.
Yeah. He's a great character. We mentioned earlier that he has a drug addiction, right? And I throughout the book, a lot of it is told from Luke's perspective. So we're talking with Mustafa Marwan of Guns and Almond Milk, and Luke talks about drugs and how they essentially take away fear. And I was struck by that line, like you take away fear, and so then it totally changes somebody's behavior
Yeah,
in the things that they choose to do based on that which is happening and having an impact on their brain and synapses and decision making.
yeah,
And I think, gosh, of all places to have a drug problem, in the middle of Yemen, he prefers the simplicity, but then he complicates things because his decision making, I think, is a little bit altered.
yeah.
Um,
That's correct, and it's scary. And for him, he has some excuse because he has constant headaches, but
mhm.
he's taking painkillers and enjoying the side effects. But from my experience as a pharmacist, and also from what I've seen, it's a very dangerous thing to be that. Of course, not talking about the morality of it. Of course, if
Right.
you're working as a doctor, um, but it's one coping mechanism that nobody talks about
Yeah.
because working as an aid worker, as we said, it's a huge toll on your mentality
Hmm.
and mental health is usually not prioritized. Recently, there is huge prioritization for
Okay.
mental health in international organizations, but still we haven't reached the stage where we can say that there are no problems. There are big problems either with addiction or drinking or anything like that. I might
Hmm.
not have seen much by myself, but we all read and see what's going on and the emotional and mental toll.
Yeah. So, can you talk a little bit about your experience and how you all cope? To make sure that you're coming from a place of, I don't know, strength, and so that you're not turning to alternative substances. But I imagine that you bond pretty closely as the group that you're with. And
That's correct. I've seen many marriages between people who have been into life at this situation with each other. So I think people connect over a cup of rusty water with microorganisms floating in it than connecting over champagne. So I think that's true. And the coping mechanisms range from Netflix to sports to different things to talking to family. But usually you don't even have the time to have free time. So you don't
right.
have the time to make your brain work against you.
Yeah, you don't have time to
And
kind of
that's a blessing.
process a little bit of what happened. Yeah. And I was
Yeah.
struck by the word Atticus, where the origin of the word that you take time to explain, it actually comes from ancient Rome. And it was the name of an individual who couldn't repay their debts and became a slave to their debtor. So it's just, there's so much. This book is, oh my gosh, how many? 240 pages, 232 pages. And as I said before, you have packed so much into this book, not just about a story that is being overtaken, and in the process, maybe not by rebels. and treating the victims that are in the hospital, making sure they receive care, but the characters and how they're working and how they come in contact with each other in unexpected ways. There's just so many wonderful little gems in this book that stop. You're reading this, and I've said this to you before when we were talking, but for everybody, that I'm reading this book, right, and I have this sense of place, like I was just in the basement of the hospital with these physicians, and there were times where I'm reading a book and I flinched, and how does that happen? And it happens because a writer has done such a good job of putting me in that place that when I heard something or something happened and unfolded, that I literally flinched. I was like, it's a book. I'm okay, right? I had to kind of take a breath. And then you work in these little wonderful stories. I think one of my favorite stories is the Nobel Prize winner. It's kind of towards the end of the book.
It's a true story, yeah.
Yeah. Will you share that with everybody?
I actually don't remember it much right now because I've written this book like 4 years ago. But I think there is, yeah, I remember now.
Okay.
So someone won the Nobel Prize for something that someone else has discovered,
Crasher.
and this someone else, yeah, is working now as a bus driver somewhere in the US. So it's about luck and fate and how things change because of 1 second or because of where you are. I believe that connections makes us who we are, not things. So it's the connection between things. And one of these connections, unfortunately, is networking and who you know rather than who you are. But again, you can take from it anything you want, because my job as a writer is to ask questions, not to provide answers. So I ask questions,
writers when
and
you do that.
yeah, you can come up with your own organic answer. For me, a book is any book is a mix of 3 parts: plot, theme, and voice. For commercial fiction, especially, the plot is the most important thing. But for me, the voice is the most important thing. How the sentence is written, and metaphors and turn of phrase, things like that. I enjoy really working on that. But then comes after it the theme, the questions that I want to ask about topics that I'm interested in, and I hope you are interested in, or I can interest you in. And then the last thing for me is the plot. Basically, I want to be friends with people who I never met in my life. And when you spend 7 hours with my book, or 6 hours, or whatever, I need to make sure that these are times well spent. That's why it's only 230 pages. But at the same time, I wanted to make it as lean as possible.
I'm joined in conversation with this incredible writer, Mustafa Marwan, who wrote Guns and Almond Milk, debut novel. You talk about it wanting to be short, and my background before libraries, I worked in radio, and so I used to write commercials, 60 seconds or roughly 120 words, and we used to always tell clients, no, if I had more time, it would be shorter. Just the ability to be that succinct and to be that deliberate with word choices so that you are having an impact. And in commercial, you have that call to action, whether it's to buy tickets to a performance or to make sure you get to that sale or make sure you know about this facility, whatever it is. So I was struck in this book that I felt like, and I don't mean this in a bad way, that I had read this gigantic tome of a book because there was so much in there, but yet the pacing and the fact that it's 200 some pages made it easy, but the weight of what you created and the questions and the things that make me think moving forward, as if I had spent months reading. So well done.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it, Jen. This is very important for me because I'm starting with a disadvantage because I'm not bilingual. My first language is Arabic. I learned English from movies and songs. And for me, that's a disadvantage when I start to write books in Arabic on an international scale. And nobody will give me an excuse because it's my second language. You have to do it right or you don't do it. So for me, that's a very important thing to hear, because this disadvantage make me a little bit not confident that I've done it the right way. And of course, a shout out to my wife, Tanya, who helped immensely with the editing, and
Yeah.
she made sure that I'm not saying anything gibberish. And she highlighted many times that, oh, that's not how we say it in English. So yeah, I wouldn't have done it without her.
So you don't, I mean, you have your wife, you don't have a translator who works alongside you. You don't, do you write a first draft in Arabic or an
No, no,
outline in
they're all in
Arabic and
English.
then all English?
All in
I,
English, yeah.
I
The
couldn't
funny thing
write.
is that I started, my first language actually is in Arabic, and I couldn't
Okay.
publish it either because it was bad or because of the political situation in Arabic countries, because it's a political novel. And then I wrote Guns and Almond Milk, and I wrote other books we can talk about that they are
Yeah,
not
please.
published yet. But no, I wrote the Guns and Almond Milk in English directly.
That is impressive. I couldn't write anything in Arabic. So to be able, I would say you are bilingual. I don't, I mean, you may not feel it, but I didn't see any lyrics pop out in here. I think we were talking Michael Jackson you used to listen to, and some of the
Yeah,
movies, that you watched. I didn't see any references. This is an accomplishment. Very well written.
thank you.
There are, you talked about three things that are important for you in a book, and a lot of times as readers, there's four doorways by which a reader enters a book. This is per Nancy Pearl, like a rock star librarian who has her own action
Mm.
figure. True story. But she
Ah,
says that people read for setting, either a place that they've been or going to or would like to go to. People read for character. People read for plot or story, or people read for language. And
mm.
typically there's like a bigger gateway or door that most people walk through, even though they can appreciate language or they can appreciate setting. Um, there's one main. This, I think, hits all four equally.
Oh,
I think there's beautiful phrases in here that are so vivid. I think the plot is on like the edge of your seat, type of what's going to happen, next. You have these amazing cast of characters. So I know we talked a little bit about Luke. Can you talk about some of the other characters in this book, like Max and
yeah.
Michael, Rachel?
So the other characters are Max. So the book, I mean, I have to say that the book is happening actually in two timelines, one in the UK and
Yes.
one in Yemen. So not all of it is in Yemen. And Max is a figure from Luke's past. We will meet him in both timelines. He's a very
Mhm.
important figure. He starts as a security contractor, which is a very clean way of saying a mercenary.
Mhm.
But he helps Luke with selling of a certain uh,
Item.
artifact
Yes.
item.
Yeah.
Uh, and in the first one, uh, and then Luke, uh, for reasons of his own, affected this relationship with Max, or destroy it a little bit. And then he
Mhm.
finds Max as the head of the mercenaries who are taking refuge in the hospital from the rebels.
Mhm.
And he doesn't want his friends, his team, to know that he has this dark past. And at the same time, Max is coming across as not a bad mercenary or not a bad character, but I hope
Mhm.
there were dignity of complexity in
Yes.
Max's character and all the
Mhm.
other cast. Uh, Michael and Manu and I forgot the name of the other character. Sorry,
Rachel. Rachel's
Rachel,
character and Anne is
Rachel
there.
and Anne. Yes,
Yeah.
Rachel and Anne. So
Mhm.
all of these are the team, the trauma team
Mhm.
that comes with Max. And I try to make for everyone their own little stories, their own scenes where we can have a glimpse at their character. Because
Mhm.
for me, uh, complexity and layers is really, as someone said, a dignity that you have to give your characters. So I hope I managed
Absolutely.
to do that, and I hope I made the reader interested in these characters as well, because it's not only about Luke, and everyone is having their own
Yes.
view of life and asking their own questions that I hope the reader would be interested in and have their organic answers to.
Yeah, you do a brilliant job, and I think that's one of the things I love about reading versus some other mediums is that you're able to kind of see inside the character's head, and you do wonderful backstories for the characters so that you understand their actions a little bit better. Like, oh, that's why. Okay, that makes sense. So you mentioned part of the structure for the book is taking place in two timelines. Can you explain why you chose to do that?
Well, I'm a pantser, so
Ah, Mike's happy
but
now.
yeah, but I try. I mean, I try to be in the middle again because extremes are bad, as we said. So
Yes,
I try to be in
virtue
the
in the
middle
middle.
between being a plotter and a pantser.
Okay.
But when I started this book, again, for me, the theme and the voice were very important. So I would write scenes. I know what the book is about. So the theme was the first thing that was clear to me, but the
Hmm.
plot came organically with time. And the ending came at a very late process, which was a very good denouement for everything. I hope you have
Absolutely.
liked it. So
Loved it.
there is a moment where you know whether you need another draft. I made 78 drafts of this book. So there is a moment where you know that if you want to make the 79th, or is it that's the best that it could get.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I don't advise any prospective readers or anyone who wants to be a writer to be a pantser. I know this is
It's very
uh,
popular.
very controversial thing to say,
Yeah.
but I think that the more professional thing to do and the thing that will save time for writers is to be plotters, at least the skeleton.
Okay.
It's not an easy thing, but if you started with a few lines saying what you want to do, that will help a lot in the process, I think.
Okay.
But again, things will change.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Your
but
characters will
at
tell you what
least
they want to do.
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good way of saying it, Jen.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at least it has a good bones before you start putting the connective tissues and sinew and muscles.
Oh, well, perfect. Because considering this is taking place in a hospital, so I'm in discussion with Mustafa Marwan, debut novel, Guns and Almond Milk. Um, Knowing you had two different timelines from the UK and then from present day in Yemen, did you write two separate drafts and put them together, or do you just alternate back? How did you approach that?
No, I write scene by scene, and I
Okay.
don't write uh, from the start to the finish. I could start a scene at the end and then
Okay.
follow it by the second scene or the third scene. What happens is that I usually use Evernote. I don't know if you
Yeah.
know.
Mhm.
So I use Evernote, and in my day, in any filler time, standing in the grocery store or having a moment by myself, I just come up with a nice phrase, and I say I have to add this to this particular scene, and then I would
Okay.
just put it on Evernote. And then at the end of the day, and I don't write every day, but when I go and sit on the computer,
Yeah.
I have this wealth of notes that I try to patch it together into something meaningful. And usually they connect to different scenes, not only to one scene. And this is
Yeah.
something
There's a
I
nice
advise also.
thread that weaves throughout this whole book.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I try. So I'm happy that you noticed that also as well. So this is also a good thing for people who want to be writers, because when you sit on the computer and the cursor is slashing at your face, you need to
right,
have something.
right now,
Exactly.
right,
You
right
you
now.
need to have something that you have already written, even if it's not structured, just to have some material to chisel. So
Yeah.
that's how I do it, and that's how I enjoy it, and that's how I wrote the sequel. So actually,
There's
there is
a,
a sequel.
yeah, you just
Yes,
made my whole day.
thank you.
Yeah.
So there is also a memoir about my works in 7 Arab Spring countries,
Okay.
but I'm trying to sell both of them right now. So I'm trying to find representation and basically a publisher for the
Okay.
memoir or the sequel. But at this stage, I'm trying to have some rest. I'm still doing the same thing with Evernote and sitting and writing, but
Yeah,
I think I just needed some time to rest and recuperate before I start
absolutely.
searching.
Absolutely.
The day is starting very well. So I'm talking to you from the future, as we said.
Yes,
It's Friday now in Australia, and the day has just started 1 hour ago by a very positive response from a literary agent.
that's
Uh,
terrific.
so let's see. It's still provincial. I mean, we're supposed to have a Zoom, so let's see how that goes.
Okay, well, keep us posted. Absolutely, for sure.
Sure.
The the other thing that you do a wonderful job. So I'm talking to Mustafa Marwan. Debut novel is Guns and Almond Milk. So excited! There's a sequel. But you talk about how people have three personalities, right? What you think you are, what other people think you are, and who you really are, right? And I think that that comes across in all of your characters. Like there's like a collision between all three of these personalities, so to speak, within themselves and then with each other. So I thought, the complexity of who we are as humans, that we're not all good and we're not all bad. You did a marvelous job, and I'm looking and I'm thinking, like, I can see in Luke, who's struggling to figure out where does he fit, where does he belong, coming to terms with those three personalities. So,
Yeah, so it's again about the point of dignity of complexity. I mean, we have
mhm.
been to the moon. We have seen the depth of the ocean. Well, not all of the oceans, some of the seas at least, but we
Yes.
haven't yet explored how our mind works. And Luke is having a problem in integration. So this is one of the questions that I wanted.
Okay.
Sorry,
That's
the
okay.
phone is ringing. But this is one of the questions that I wanted people to have an organic answer to with me.
Hmm.
Where does Luke belong? One of the question is Islam in Western societies, because Luke is a Muslim.
Hmm.
Uh, does it fit? If it fits, do you need to lose some of your beliefs, or is it like any other religion? It can fit seamlessly. And I'm not
Hmm.
answering the question. I'm just giving the struggles that Luke had. It's not the
Yes.
struggles of every Muslim, just to be clear.
Right.
But it's a slice of life that I want people to ponder about right now. What it means to be living in the West and having even a religion, not necessarily Muslim, but any other religion. So this is the topic I'm interested in, the topic
Yeah.
of identity as well, because Luke is also Egyptian.
Hmm.
So how do you connect to your own uh, heritage, which you don't know anything about, because he was
Yeah.
born in the UK?
And exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sorry, go ahead.
That's all right. I was waiting. I'm sorry I interrupted.
No, 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 no. So all of these are the questions. I mean, obviously, addiction is another question that I want to talk about,
Hmm.
and I wanted to portray it uh, in a light that allows for comprehension to why people have do what they do and become addicts.
Yeah.
Uh, One person told me once that they were in a needle exchange program, and someone was asking, "Why are you taking medications or being addicted?" And then one ex-junkie said, "Because it's fun,
Yeah.
simple as it is,
It's
because
human
it's
nature.
Tuesday."
We gravitate towards things that bring us joy, and we kind of shy away from the stuff that we don't
Yeah,
like. It's human nature.
exactly. Yeah, it might be Tuesday and you have nothing to do, but for some people, it's even more complex than that.
Right.
Some people want it to be normal. So
Hmm.
there are many functional addicts that nobody talks about.
Hmm.
Um, for Luke, it's about his headache. So the headache was one of the reasons, or only a sample of the reasons why people become addicts. I hope the community can embrace addicts and help them get rid of such affliction
Hmm.
rather than make them outcasts.
With
But again, the answer is not for me. It's again the question.
It's a great question, and if I'm going to be really honest here, because I think it's important, I'm reading this book, and last Thursday had an unexpected root canal
Mhm.
and was in a significant
That's
amount
not
of
easy.
pain. That's
Mhm.
okay. But the doctor wanted to prescribe pain medicine, and I was like, absolutely not. because I'm reading this book and I'm thinking it starts off with something innocuous, starts off with headaches for Luke, right? And next thing you
Yeah.
know, the way his brain is wired and his, genetic disposition, it's a disease. People, I don't think, choose to be an addict like that. So I'm thinking, oh, this is going to end well if I take this. And next thing you know, so I was like, no, thank you. I was like, thank you, Dr. Luke.
Yeah,
Reading your
but
book. I mean, those are the things that something innocent starts this cascade of events that don't always
yeah.
have happy endings.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a line in this book or the next one, but drugs work until they don't.
Oh no, it must be the
Uh,
next one. Yeah.
yeah, so they in the beginning it might be good, but eventually they are not going to work, and then you're in big trouble. But the question is, why are they taking it, and how to embrace them in a way uh, that allows for making them good members of society, basically. For the root canal, that's very
Yeah.
brave of you. You were
No big
telling me
deal.
that you were in Bangkok recently.
Yes.
A dentist in Bangkok once told me that Thais also don't like pain medication because they don't like the needle, and many of them choose to have it without
Yeah.
with the pain. I don't know how accurate is that, but uh, that's what he said. Just as we were talking about the topic.
I know. I'm hoping that Mike will edit this part out and those who are listening live will forgive me. But they also use something in the dentist's office so that your tongue doesn't get in the way of where they're working,
Mhm.
which is kind of like a balloon and keeps your jaw open. And
Mhm.
dentist said, I know you're a gagger. And I'm like, okay. He's like, can I try something? Acupuncture. He put a needle in my chin and
Oh,
it completely like eliminated the gag reflex. So
oh,
then I say to
fascinating.
him, he's like, will you try it? And I was like, yeah, I'll try anything. That's no problem. So I had a needle in my chin the whole time. And so I'm like, well, where did you learn that? And I'm thinking he's going to tell me like the latest dental convention. He's like, nope, Instagram. I'm like, oh, good God. I'm so glad I asked you after.
Wow. Well,
Can you
that's a
imagine?
good
I
story.
saw it on TikTok, right? The power of
Mm,
social media. Um,
wow.
so
Yeah, and
yeah,
that's the power. Just talking about the power of social media, most of the sales of my book are from social media and from people telling their friends and buying 3 or 4 copies and sending it to their
yeah,
friends. And I think I've been very blessed with that because it's not easy to sell books now. I mean, you know this better
yeah,
than anyone. And it's
yeah.
the abundance of books, not the lack of it, that is the problem right now. So I
Yes.
consider myself very lucky that it found their audience by word of mouth mostly, actually.
It's been terrific. You're talking about these questions that you bring up in this book, right? And not the answers. That's for us, right? So I'm joined in discussion with Mustafa Marwan, debut novel Guns and Almond Milk. There's a line in the book. Carrying a gun doesn't make people fear you. In the end, it's the heart that pulls the trigger, not the hand.
Yeah.
I had to stop
Uh,
after I read that and just think for a while. It's
yeah.
another powerful question.
I mean, in my job, I meet many people with blood in their hands, and you think that those people have been altered forever. They have this steel conscious that doesn't care, but actually, most of them are very nice people.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a paradox I don't know how to deal with. I don't know how can you kill someone and then laugh and joke about it. So that maybe this line was also another question to make
Mm-hmm.
us all wonder how what does it mean to carry a gun uh, and kill someone. And I've seen a lot of people who just carry guns for show and they would never kill anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and a friend once told me that in war there are 3 types of people who carry guns.
Okay.
Uh, those who go first on the front line and fight, and those who watch and take photos, and those who steal, who die before the first type.
Wow.
I've never forgot that. I've been told this saying in 2011 in Libya, and I've never forgot it.
No, it comes across in so well in this book that this is life is complex, and you have built in all these nuances and all these things that impact the choices that the characters make, or we as human beings make. The other thing I'm struck by, and I think it points back to something you talked a little bit about earlier, is that Luke talks about changing himself by changing his environment and what he is connected to and how. And you talked before that you thought life is not about things, but about connections.
Yeah, I totally believe in that. And there is scientific evidence uh, that that also talks about in chemistry and physics that how you can change. I mean, basically, coal and diamonds are the same carbon molecules. It's just different connections. I mean, that's the simplest metaphor I could give.
Right.
And I believe that if you are in a rut, if you have problems, it's not because of you. It's because of the networks that caused this. It could be your environment. It could be something like that, and you need to change something.
Mm-hmm.
The settings are very important. How you are thinking
Mm-hmm.
and how you can change it. So, for example, some people would be depressed for a while, and once they do sports for 10 minutes, they feel they are normal with the rush of
Yes.
endorphins.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, others travel, others read. So if there is a question there is for everyone to see what changes their set and settings and lead them to change their story. Because if you change the set and settings, your story will change and your strategy of how you deal with life change. Tim Ferriss has this written somewhere on his wall, setting equal story, which equal your strategy.
So such wisdom. I mean, I think we're
Mhm.
all going to be thinking about that for quite a while. I think we live in a time where people prefer to be distracted because the very act of sitting may make them uncomfortable with their story. Um, it's just amazing, constantly on phones, and just nice to be able to kind of disconnect for a while. Um,
Yeah,
so such wisdom. I feel like we got
yeah.
like an additional degree while we were talking to you. Certainly,
Thank
for
you.
sure. Yeah. So, and then the other, thing that I was struck by the theme in the book is the juxtaposition between the atrocities of war. How these rebels were, picking people off, and then the very simple acts of kindness. Um, that they're not mutually exclusive, that they exist alongside. And I'm always struck by, like, well, if we can be kind, why can't we be kind of kind all the time? You know?
Yeah,
Um, so
yeah, and that's why if you are dealing with people who have blood on their hands as problems, they will act as problems.
yeah,
That's why you really need to deal with them with kindness. And what they have done is not for you to
what?
to penalize them for it.
Yeah,
I mean, especially if you are trying to do good, especially if they are on a border crossing and you need to cross to the vulnerable people and talk to them.
right,
I'm not saying that you have to sit with them and have a coffee just because you're friends. It's not, I mean, still, the people
right,
with blood on their hands are a special kind of people that not
right.
everyone can stomach talking to. But if they are the hurdle for you to do good, then don't treat them as problems. Otherwise, they will act as problems.
Yeah,
That's my experience. And then you can
fascinating.
apply this to many things in your normal life as well. HR
Absolutely.
person who's giving you a harsh time, just don't
Yeah.
treat them as problems and see what happens.
You know what? It's who was it? Was it Roosevelt that said, if you think you can or can't, you're probably right. But it's that same type
Hmm.
of attitude that, like, if I think I'm going to be successful, then more than likely that happens, right? So if you treat somebody like a success versus treating them like a problem or
I like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm joined in conversation, Mustafa Marwan. I can continue talking for a much longer time. Guns and Almond Milk debut novel. Um, so we have a sequel coming, your
Yeah.
memoir coming. So awesome. We have great things to look forward to. So final 5 questions. Are you
All
a morning
right.
person? Are you a morning person or a night owl?
No, I'm a morning person.
You're a morning person. After the phone call you got, I'd be a morning person from now on.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. So thank God we are having this now. I also have ADHD, but I don't know if this contributes to me being a morning person or a night person. But sometimes I get very exhausted at night. So anyway, morning person for sure.
Morning person. Okay. What's the screensaver on your phone?
It's my 4-month-old daughter,
Aw, so sweet. What's her name?
Alia.
Oh, so fun. Do you read the ending of a book first?
No, I don't do that
No,
because
I don't hang with those people either.
no, I enjoy I try to enjoy the journey. I used to read 100 book a year, but
Wow.
now I try to decrease that because it's the journey that counts. I mean, it's a bumper sticker, but it's still true.
Oh, heck, with that little one, you're going to read more than 100 books. You're going to probably read like Goodnight Moon 100 times and, so there you go. You're still reading a lot. Which of the characters, Luke, Michael, Max, or Manu, would you take a road trip with?
Luke.
Luke.
Yeah, I think it's Luke. Yeah.
What's the best lesson from your work as a humanitarian aid?
The dignity of complexity. There is no white and black. There is always shades of gray.
Absolutely. So I've been joined in conversation this evening with the phenomenal writer, Mustafa Marwan. So thank you for everyone who's watching and listening. Thank you to Mike, our tech team, to make sure everything went smoothly. A huge thank you to Max Backs, our independent bookstore, for making sure they have copies of Mustafa's books, because I know you're going to run out and buy not one, not two, several copies of this book, because it's great for discussion. And finally, a huge thank you to you, Mustafa, for joining us this evening. I'm Jen Jumba with
Thanks,
Writers
Jen.
Unplugged. Yeah. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Jen. That was amazing discussion. Loved it.
Yeah. Sweet.